Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you back to the Dynamic Decisions podcast, where we explore strategies that drive successful decision making in the world of business. Why? Because the best decisions come from great conversations. I'm your host, Tisha Cable, CEO of C Model Data, and today we have a pioneering researcher and entrepreneur who is reimagining how AI can be built from the ground up. His name is Dr. David Roberts. He's actually currently co-founder and CEO of Organic Intelligence Technologies. He's an associate professor of computer science at North Carolina State University, and he is also right now at North Carolina State University serving as the interim director of the Digital Games Research Center. And I got one last thing. He is a co-founder along with me and Dr. Loria Pratt of OpenDI, which we'll talk a little bit about later on today. So welcome to the show, Dr. Roberts. So happy to have you here. Would you tell us a little bit more about you and all of the work that you're doing, including anything that I just didn't even list?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, and I'd be happy to talk a little bit about what I do. As professors, we love to talk, so this is right in my wheelhouse. I got my start as a computer scientist. I was studying statistical machine learning as a grad student at Georgia Tech. And I always found myself drawn to these problems that involve humans. And as a grad student, I was looking at how social psychology can be integrated into algorithms that reconfigure video game environments to change the way that people make decisions in video games. And I also am very interested in behavioral psychology and how we can use computers to influence the way that animals behave, and how we can translate that back into new machine learning algorithms. And so I've kind of been a little bit all over the place, but my interests really lie at this intersection of computation and behavior in the real world. And that's why I got super interested in human decision making and how AI and humans can combine their unique powers to create these hybrid systems that end up producing better outcomes than either system on its own would.
This is great. And so let's just dive right on in. So one of the things is we're looking at the AI, quote unquote, the AI industry. And we know that there really have been some breakthroughs, especially using statistical machine learning, neural networks, processing massive data sets to really find these patterns. But these systems, they learn fundamentally different than like biological organisms do. All right. So animals, they learn through reinforcement, shaping, sort of, I guess, operant conditioning. But there are these principles from behavioral analysis that have been refined over all of these years. And you've now got all of this work. And it applies these biological learning principles to machine learning algorithms. Can you kind of talk us through a little bit about what happens when you build AI systems that end up learning the way that animals actually learn rather than using traditional statistical approaches?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think what happens is you end up with this more natural mode for humans to instruct AI systems to do the things that they want them to do. I think a lot of this work actually came before large language models were a thing, and it was really easy to just kind of talk to AI and get them to do reasonable things. Nonetheless, I still think there's amazing opportunity for it. But if you look at what humans and animals are able to accomplish together, I'll cite examples of guide dogs. We've done a lot of work with guide dogs, right? So these are dogs that are absolutely mission critical. And if they mess up, there can be real severe harm done to the people they're guarding. You look at, explosives and drug detection. You look at mine detection. You look at therapy dogs. The things that humans are able to accomplish when they have such a comparatively impoverished vocabulary, shared vocabulary with these other species is unbelievable. So there's a lot of power in these biological learning principles. And even though few people really have incredible depth of knowledge on behavioral science, they're still somehow able to accomplish these things. I mean, most people are able to get their dogs to be fairly well behaved around the house without a lot of formal training. So now think about if AI systems responded to these intuitive notions of how we change and shape behavior of those around us in ways that we see animals. I think it opens up the door for people that aren't me, that don't have the benefit of a PhD in machine learning, to start to do really incredible things with AI. And in fact, perhaps a little known fact, the way that these large language models, these ChatGPTs and Google Geminis of the world are trained, you have your standard supervised learning that builds these models, but the way that they get adjusted is through reinforcement learning, which is a model of how animals learn these behavioral science principles. One that I think has drifted fairly far away from modern knowledge that we have in behavior science, but nonetheless was rooted in these concepts and developed as a way to operationalize these behavioral science concepts in artificial intelligence.
Okay, this is great. But tell me a little bit about if there are any particular capabilities that emerge that conventional machine learning really struggles with. And are there things that actually excite you most about this behavior-based foundation?
100%. I think the biggest thing for me is there's a lot of focus when we talk about training AI systems and animals for that matter on the consequences for actions, or when do we give reinforcement, when do we give punishment. And certainly we know a ton about that from behavioral science. The collective store of behavioral science knowledge on that is massive and very well refined. But what has not been operationalized effectively in the artificial intelligence world is what's known as antecedent manipulation in the behavior science world. In other words, how you change the environment, how you change what you ask of an animal contains a huge amount of information. We call it a pragmatic implicature, right? There's this implied information in the juxtaposition of criteria. So if you ask an animal to do one task and then you change that task in a certain way that you've changed that task reveals a huge amount of information about what is expected. And AI systems, as a general rule, really are terrible at that. There's no sort of core principle in AI algorithms that operationalizes this concept of antecedent manipulation as a first principle. Some systems will get a little bit of that behavior as a side effect, but it's an artifact. It's not the goal. So it's one of the things we've been working a lot on, is especially when you have neural networks, which are underlying all these big AI models that are so popular right now, that are sensitive to the ordering of examples that are given to them when you train them. Right. So if you take your data set and you randomly reshuffle it, if you start from the same place, you end up in a very different place in what that model produces. And so when you have that characteristic, you're really sort of fighting the tendencies that we see in animals, which is to learn from that information more effectively as opposed to get confused by it. So I think that's one area where I think there's huge opportunity, an area we put a lot of effort into over the years.
Now, let's translate that to what about that experience has actually, is there an insight of working with animals in this way that has unexpectedly shaped how you think about human AI interaction in these decision-making systems?
Unexpectedly. Oh, that's a
Yeah,
good one.
that's right. We got to throw a twist.
Unexpectedly. I
Yeah.
mean, so much of what we do in research is unexpectedly, right? We take a pseudo random walk through the space of possibilities, and I think some of the best researchers are, in my humble opinion, are very, of course, hypothesis driven, but their hypotheses are constantly changing. There's a lot of inspiration and then checking, and inspiration and checking. And so I came to this space because when I first started working in reinforcement learning, this idea of what was called curriculum learning very much did exist, right? And I was like, oh, yeah, cool. This is what we do with animals, right? They call it shaping by successive approximation with animals. And in reinforcement learning, it's curriculum learning. But then when I actually first started as a faculty member back in 2010, I had my first student go to run some experiments on curriculum learning. And we were kind of looking at this. We're like, wait a minute, they're calling it curriculum learning, and it kind of at face value looks like a curriculum, but it's not actually producing learning the way that a curriculum, right, or shaping would produce it in the way that animals does. So
Mhm.
to me, I think one of the really surprising things in artificial intelligence is there's a lot of appropriation of terminology
Mhm.
from behavioral science, from biology generally, when you think about neural networks, when
Mhm.
you think about things like genetic algorithms and simulated annealing, right? These
Mhm.
are all artificial intelligence techniques that are rooted in physical and behavioral phenomenon. But when you actually peel back the onion a little bit and you kind of go a layer deeper, you realize that there's a loose inspiration in these biological constructs, and the actual functions of these things are quite a bit different. And I think
Mhm.
you made this point at the very beginning, Tisha, when you said, the way that AI systems are trained is, and the way they operate is actually different than what we see in the biology. Certainly, there are strong similarities, and I actually just lectured on this to some of my students in the last couple of weeks, and it gives me hope that they can get better. But we need to kind of plug some of those gaps, I think, before we really can see AI emerge to a level of intelligence that many people, I think, want to
They
ascribe to it
Yeah,
already.
they imagine it right now.
They do, for
It's like
sure.
AI beyond the math. That's what I call it right now.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. Yeah.
um,
And that might be okay, right? In isolated circumstances, as long as you go into it eyes wide open, there's nothing wrong with that. But you need to be aware that AI is not a silver bullet. It is
that's right.
incredibly powerful tool,
Sure.
but like all tools, they have their appropriate uses and their limitations. And as long as you
That's
are conscious of those things, there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's great. Just, be careful
yeah.
about ascribing more to it than it is deserved, right?
That's a great point. I hope our audience got that one. Hey, so traditional AI development really follows this path, right? You collect massive data sets, you train the models, you validate performance, you deploy it at scale. But your lab at North Carolina State takes a real different approach, right? You're studying biological organisms and how they actually make decisions in real environments. And then you build out the computational systems that mirror those principles. So when you're making research investment type decisions about which directions to pursue, whether that's wearable physiological monitoring or drone assisted dog handling in your case, or novel reinforcement learning architectures, how do you identify which biological principles are actually going to translate most powerfully into a breakthrough AI capability? Is there any framework that you're using that helps you to really distinguish between something that might be an interesting biological phenomena or a real opportunity that's going to really advance computational intelligence?
100%. Yeah. So I think in a short word, right,
Yes.
we are user centered. So we take very much a sort of a problem focused to things. I think there are many ways to be successful in research. Some people get really good at a particular technique, and then they go around and they look for different problems to solve with that technique. Some people are very fundamentally problem driven, which is a little more consistent with my approach to things, right? I get excited about problems and I figure out what direction they take me in terms of the technology. And I think when you are more on the problem focused side, you need to be sensitive to the context in which these problems are taking place. Right. So acknowledging that these systems, I mean, maybe you could make an argument that some of the more abstract theoretical work we do lives kind of in the ether. But for the most part, right, we're looking at real world scenarios. And so we have to acknowledge that what we're working on are actually socio-technical artifacts. They're not just pieces of software, but they're pieces of software that have some tangible connection to the real world. And
Come
with
on.
that comes this context and this scenario where we need to be user centered and
Yeah.
understand the needs and characteristics of the environment and the users. I think that a lot of the work we do with non-human animals has really pushed me in this direction because we have users that can't articulate, at least not in the same way, their needs and desires. And so it's really forced us to, as a part of our process, to put ourselves in the mindset of our users to the extent that we can,
Mhm.
to build into what we do lots of ways to try to objectively measure the experience of users so that we can understand the effectiveness of what we're doing. and to then be humble and understand that we are likely going to get it wrong the first time through, because we, in the case of non-human animals especially, we have very few shared experiences. And so it's difficult, that first step in this process of trying to put ourselves in the mindset of our users. It's
Mm-hmm.
difficult to do that effectively, right? And I think if you can
Mm-hmm.
embrace all of those things and then iterate, and in a way that is very responsive to your users, you end up in a much better place.
I agree. I think it should be just core in anything that's learned along the way, especially with even if it's all about building a business.
Hmm.
Ultimately, the user, the person at the end who's going to have to determine whether or not you're successful or not, should be at the center and the core.
Yeah.
Speaking of the user, speaking of the user, you are a co-founder, shout out to us, and contributor to OpenDI, which is working to establish standards for decision intelligence systems. Okay. So this really does represent this truly fascinating evolution where we start to move beyond AI, because it recognizes patterns to AI that really support, again, actual human decision making, but in these very complex, consequential situations. So when you are thinking about how decision intelligence systems should be architected, are there principles that, even if they are principles from some of your animal behavior or biological learning work, which ones do you believe are essential but currently missing from conventional AI approaches? And then I'll add to this, because I like double questions on this show. How does understanding how decisions get made in uncertain environments actually inform how you should build systems, especially the ones that help people make these strategic choices?
Yeah. So let me answer the second one first, and then I'll try to back up to the first. But
Awesome.
I got to warn you, there's a good chance I'll get lost in that train of thought
That's
and not
okay.
come
And, and
back. But
and we'll go with it. We'll just keep flowing.
but I
Yeah.
think, a lot of what I just said about being user centered and building in these points for reflection and objective measurement of the effectiveness, really are the principles I think that are critical for supporting decision making in these messy real world environments, right? You have hypotheses that go into your decision making. A lot of times, if we're effective, especially with decision intelligence, they are, informed hypotheses, and ideally very well informed hypotheses. But at the end of the day, there's a lot that's not within your control, and you need to be able to checkpoint and make sure that things are moving in the direction that you wanted them to move, and then to adjust if they are not. And a lot of what I think decision intelligence brings to the table is a really nice framework that allows you to engineer the support for that into your process, and ideally then also into the tools and technologies that support that as well, right? So that you've got this ability to execute your decision, or to research your decision, then execute your decision, and then track how it's going relative to how you thought it was going to go, and then adjust, right, and iterate. So that, I think, one of the exciting ways where we see decision intelligence supporting better decision making. When it comes to, how does this differ from AI? I mean, I think there has long been this, I almost want to say, tacit assumption in AI, this have data, let's make decision approach
Right.
is the way to go. And I just went to a talk last night from a VP at a big company in this AI and decision making space that will remain nameless for
Okay.
these purposes. And the whole talk was about data.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
entire
Yeah.
talk was
That's
about data.
go on. Hmm.
Yeah. And, it was a great talk. I enjoyed it
Yeah.
a lot, but I found myself just scratching my head and saying, this is all great, and these are wonderful tools to have in your arsenal, but they are simply tools, and they are not where you should be starting. They are there to, like, address gaps in specific scenarios or situations and where decisions need to be made. And I think that was, again, keeping with this idea of being user centered, right? That was really what opened my eyes to decision intelligence, and why I got so interested in it is, you have to start with the scenario, right? The people, the stakeholders that are involved. And then from there, you look for opportunities to figure out how technology can impact that. And I think OpenDI is constructed in such a way to try to promote that. Vision for it is to make it as responsive to the diverse stakeholders that are out there as possible and make as least commitment possible to technology, that those that are trying to solve real world problems can plug in the appropriate technologies at the appropriate time.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you came into a relationship with Dr. Lori and Pratt around this and how you guys decided
I would love to. It's
yes,
actually
thank
a
you.
funny story.
Yeah.
So for me, it's funny. Hopefully, you'll find it funny too. But Dr. Pratt and I, when we first met, it was actually at breakfast at a conference that we were at, and we butted heads immediately. We just started going back and forth and having the kind of debate at breakfast that everyone else at the table was like, oh my God, what is happening here? And yeah, we went back and forth for probably 20 minutes. And then we walked away from that table with immense mutual respect for each other, and had a wonderful time hanging out for the rest of the conference. And very soon thereafter, looked for ways to start to work together. I did some consulting for her on a couple of projects that she had for a little while. And the whole time she was telling me about decision intelligence, this new thing that she was working on. And at that point, she was working on her first book, Link. And I will readily admit that I was a little skeptical at first, but kind of as a favor to a friend, I bought the book on Amazon and I started reading it, and I literally couldn't put it down.
Yeah.
Something really resonated with me on a deep level about it. And since then, we have collaborated on many projects on decision intelligence. We have looked for opportunities to fund projects. We've collaborated on several really large grant proposals, including a big funded project from the Department of Agriculture looking at sweet potato supply chains and how we can apply DI to improve decision making there in
Yeah.
a culturally responsive way for producers. It's been a wonderful journey that sort of led to the conceptualization of OpenDI, and of course, getting connected with you at C Model and getting to work with you guys as well. So it's been really
Yeah.
fun.
It really has been. So I'm also going to shout out Dr. Lori and Pratt. I love because when I'm talking to people that have been brought together in a circumstance, she's definitely been a huge person for me, just around just how well developed decision intelligence actually is and how applicable it is in real life. It's crazy how much work we have to do to get people to understand, but she's truly a pioneer. So just shout out to her for doing that and bringing us together. So let's keep going. Here's a little message for our audience really quickly. I want you to think about your organization's AI and decision-making systems. What opportunities might you be missing by following conventional approaches rather than looking to biological intelligence for inspiration? I would love for you to share your experiences with us on LinkedIn and other social media using Dynamic Decisions Podcast. Okay, before we get into my favorite section, I'm going to ask you one more question really about you. So you've really got a remarkable career. You've been balancing academic research and leadership, but also directing the lab. And then you've also got your undergraduate programs. You're leading the Digital Games Research Center. You have your entrepreneurial ventures, commercializing all of these discoveries that you have. And these roles might create tension. Academic research, it values breakthroughs and long-term exploration. Startups need practical applications and revenue generation. Can you walk me through a specific moment when a discovery in your academic lab revealed commercial potential that you really hadn't anticipated?
Absolutely. So I actually am working on a third startup at this particular point in time. It's called, well, we might have to change the name. So I'll say it's called Pawmetric today, but might be changing here pretty soon. And it's based on a lot of the work that we've been doing historically with service and guide dog organizations on using wearable systems to collect objective measurements that allow them to estimate the aptitude of these dogs that they invest huge sums of money in to become working guide and service dogs. So it was something that I thought was going to be an academic pursuit because these are nonprofits that we very much want to support. And it feels really icky to build a business around nonprofits. And, but, at some point, somebody, pointed out to me that there's immense commercial potential here beyond these nonprofit organizations, and that this could be a really interesting way to build a profitable business that can subsidize work with nonprofits. And so to me, it was really exciting to know that some of these predictive capabilities, which we never actually formalized as a causal decision diagram or a causal decision model in the DI sense, but because part of it is we just started working on this long before I knew what these things were. But I had this sort of aha moment where I realized that, we had actually kind of tacitly been doing a lot of these things anyway, right? We learned the process that they went through to, breed, raise, train, and place these working dogs. We learned where the challenges were. We learned about what might be relevant for making those decisions and what could be measured objectively within the set of things that were relevant. And that led to the production of ultimately the capabilities that we have. And then, yeah, like I said, we were moving in this direction of happily building up this academic practice around it. And then suddenly it became this moment where there was interest. We were encouraged to apply for some transitional funding within the university, with some great support from our Chancellor's Innovation Fund and from a donor that topped up that program. We got to explore the commercial potential and have since not only found that there is potential, but that people really like it. We have a wonderful team in place now that's very complementary to our skill sets as academics. And I like to say academics are fundamentally entrepreneurs. We're just entrepreneurial within a different circle than entrepreneurs that are working in the startup world, because we have to do many of the same things, right? We have to find interesting problems. We have to find people that care about those problems. We have to find funding to support those. We have to grow our teams, right? And we have sort of all of the same risks that you experience as a startup founder. You have those same risks in the academic world. We have a little more of a cushion. Tenure is a really nice thing. So we can take bigger swings, I think, than a lot of startups can. But at the end of the day, we're doing many of the same, at least on a meta level, we're doing many of the same things that an entrepreneur.
But you're gonna dot more I's and cross more T's, though.
I think that's the bigger thing. Like we have while we take big swings, like we pick really hard problems that might have like a 99% failure, we take a much slower, more concerted pathway to get there, right? It's very much okay if we spend 10 years working on something and it doesn't pan out.
That's
right.
Yeah.
Where in the startup world, you've got 2 years max if you're really good at fundraising.
You get 5 years to build an exponential growth company. You get in real life. Yeah. Sure. 2 is usually going to start telling you whether or not it's going to work or not. But 5 is that's what you've got to really get it together.
Yeah. And 2 years into a project in academics, we've barely even gotten started.
Right. You might have a budget.
Yeah. Yeah. Forget a team, forget all the equipment that you need.
Okay. So we're going to jump in. This is called the decision-making persona test. Okay. You ready? So we're going to explore your decision-making style through a persona assessment. I'm going to ask you 4 different questions that represent different decision-making approaches. And after each one of them, you're going to tell me how much the way that I'm asking the question resonates with how you actually approach decisions. Now, you'll have a scale here from 0 to 100%. However, you only get 100% across all of them.
Okay.
Okay?
So I need to take notes here?
So I like people to keep track of their amounts because this is just kind of a fun part of this. So keep track of your amounts. And the other thing is I'm not going to give you all of them up front. You're going to answer each one and kind of give your little explanation and we'll kind of go from there. Okay. So you got it, right? So here we go. We're going to jump right on in. So here's the very first one. It's called the feeler. It's a values-driven leader. So this persona prioritizes alignment with core values and mission, often weighing the human impact and cultural fit of decisions alongside business metrics. When I'm evaluating whether to pursue a research direction or commercial application, perhaps developing wearable monitoring technology for working dogs or creating behavior analysis inspired learning algorithms, I ask myself, beyond the technical innovation, what positive impact will this create for both animals and humans? If we're building systems that help trainers communicate more effectively with search and rescue dogs, are we strengthening those human animal bonds in ways that honor both species capabilities? If we're commercializing animal computer interaction technology, are we creating tools that genuinely improve animal welfare while expanding what's possible in human animal collaboration? When partners like Guiding Eyes for the Blind trust us with technologies that affect guide dogs and the people who depend on them, I need confidence that we're building systems that respect the dignity and intelligence of all parties involved. The question becomes, does this work contribute to a future where biological and artificial intelligence enhance rather than diminish what makes both humans and animals remarkable? Okay, so David, how much does approaching decisions by asking yourself these kind of values-based questions resonate with you?
I haven't heard the other categories yet, but if I could put 100% on that, I would.
But you can't. But you can't.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I really wanted that. All of that, it felt like I don't know where you got all that from, but it felt like you were quoting me. Yeah. That was really very much how I approach things. And in fact, I have to be very, honest that we often get some of the partners that we work with on those projects. We get some frustration at the pace that we move at. And, I mentioned academics can be a little slower on things, but we've actually been incredibly slow on that project because we're talking about a real world system where if we get it wrong, the impact on populations that really have their lives altered in such a powerful way, right? People with visual disabilities that need or benefit from a working dog. If we screw that up, what they're already doing pretty well, we've had a really, really big failure, like really big failure. So we've been extra thoughtful and deliberative in our process as we go through to ensure that everything we're doing is in service of improving and enhancing quality of life for both the human animal and the non-human animal here, right? As well as these organizations. Yeah. I mean, I heard you say, and I was like, yes, 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 all of these things. Yes.
So what's your percentage? How much are you giving the feeler? What are you giving it?
Oh gosh. I know I can't give it 100. I'm going to be conservative-ish.
Okay.
And gosh, where am I going to put this? Because I don't know the other categories. I'm going to put it at I'm going to give myself some wiggle room, even though I don't want to. I'm going to put it at a 70.
Okay. 70%. That leaves you with 30% left. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Here we go. Here's your next one. It's called the planner. It's a strategic visionary. So this persona focuses on long-term implications and future-proofing decisions, always thinking several moves ahead and considering multiple scenarios. So when I'm making strategic decisions about organic intelligence technologies, technical architecture, or research priorities, whether to focus on decision intelligence standards or expand animal computer interaction applications or advance behavior-based learning algorithms, I ask myself, what are the second and third order effects across multiple future scenarios? If biological computing advances with organoid intelligence and wetware systems, does our behavior based approach position us to integrate those capabilities naturally? If edge computing and IoT enable real time behavior analysis in field environments, does our architecture scale to support thousands of simultaneous interactions? If organizations increasingly recognize the traditional AI lacks crucial decision-making capabilities that biological systems possess, have we built frameworks that let them adopt behavior-inspired approaches without abandoning existing infrastructure? I'm mapping how today's technical decisions create compounding advantages, whether that's contributing to OpenDI standards that shape industry direction, building capabilities that transfer across application domains, or developing expertise that becomes increasingly valuable as the limitations of conventional AI become more apparent. So, David, how much does that forward thinking, scenario planning approach to questioning actually resonate with how you make decisions?
I think it's in my process, but it's nowhere near where I started. I absolutely do it. And I actually pride myself on the ability to be very objective and take a step back and think through these things. But it's something that I come to eventually, not where I start from. So I would put that, if of my 30% that's left, I would maybe be super non-committal and give it 10%.
It's okay. I do this all the time, so I've got expectations around how people are going to use these numbers. That's pretty good. Okay, here we go. Here's your next one. It's called the counter, which is a challenger of assumptions. So this persona naturally questions conventional wisdom and looks for contrarian opportunities, often finding success by zigging when others zag. So when I see the AI industry racing towards larger language models, more training data, and exponentially greater computational power, I ask myself, what if we're scaling in the wrong dimension? What if the breakthrough isn't more parameters, but fundamentally different learning architectures? The field has accepted that AI requires massive data sets and enormous computational resources, but biological organisms learn remarkably sophisticated behaviors from surprisingly few examples. A puppy masters complex skills through shaped reinforcement, not by processing millions of labeled images. What if the real competitive advantage comes from building systems that learn efficiently like animals rather than systems that brute force pattern recognition through scale? The industry has mostly abandoned behavioralist principles in favor of connectionist approaches. But what if those classical learning theories, refined over decades of animal research, contain insights that could transform modern AI? What orthodoxies has machine learning accepted, supervised learning paradigms, backpropagation dominance, reward function design that we could challenge by looking to how biological intelligence actually works? So, David, how much does that assumption, challenging, contrarian style of questioning resonate with your decision-making process?
Also 100%.
I knew that, but let's
Also
go.
100%. I wouldn't say that I'm as passionate about that.
Okay.
So the feeler, like, I feel like I'm really passionate about, but when it comes to sort of challenging assumptions, it is core. I detest being in the hype cycle, being in the crowd, and I actually lose interest. The more people become interested in what I do, the less interested I am in continuing to work on it, and I like to go find something new. So that resonates with me a lot. Can I when do I get to go back and revise my numbers?
So if you want to start a revision now, you can before we get to the last one. Up to
No,
you.
I'm gonna. I can't do it after the last one. I gotta.
Okay,
get
you can
ahead of
go
time.
back after the last one if you want.
Okay.
I'll make
Yeah.
an
I
exception for
suspect
you.
I'm gonna revise my
So what do you want
feeler
to give
down a
this one
little
though?
bit, but this for sure. Challenging assumptions is really sort of fundamental to how I approach things, and
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons. I think it's like pragmatic on the one hand. I think when I see a trend, and I think, man, there's a ton of people that are doing things this way. I'm like, either they're right and more power to them, or they have blind spots, and I want to know what they are.
So what's your
And
percentage? You got to give me a number. I need a number. You got
what's my percentage?
20%. You're,
Geez,
you're working with
I got
20%.
20 left. I'm gonna give it 15 for now because
Okay.
that's my budget is limited. But I would make that higher when I have the chance to revise.
Yeah, you're about to go through a major conflict because here's the very last one, okay? It's called the data driver. It's an evidence-based decision maker. So this persona relies heavily on metrics, analytics, and concrete evidence to validate decisions, preferring proof over intuition. So before committing to technical directions or commercialization strategies, I ask myself, what does our empirical evidence actually reveal about when behavior-based approaches outperform conventional methods? I want controlled comparisons showing learning efficiency, generalization capability, and robustness under novel conditions, not just anecdotal success stories. Our animal computer interaction research generates rich behavioral data, how animals respond to different interaction modalities, personalities, which training approaches accelerate learning, what physiological markers predict performance. Segmenting by species, task complexity, and environmental conditions helps identify principles that generalize versus context specific findings. At the same time, I'm asking, what critical insights resist clean quantification? How do you measure whether a working dog trusts a technological system enough to rely on it in high stakes situations? What qualitative signals from trainers, handlers, and intelligence community partners reveal opportunities that our metrics might miss? The goal, it's building decision frameworks that combine rigorous empirical validation with deep domain expertise. So we're advancing both scientific understanding and practical impact. Okay, so how much does that data-driven, evidence-focused approach to questioning resonate with how you make strategic decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is another one where it is absolutely fundamentally core to what I do, but is not one that I'm like passionate about. It's just the scientific method, right? I mean, that's what we do as scientists. We very much seek to collect evidence for what we're trying to accomplish. So yeah, it resonates with me super strong because it's, it's there, but it's like getting out of bed in the morning. Of course you do it, right? It's exceptional when you don't. So, yeah, I 5 feels inappropriate because of how important it is, but, yeah, of course it's my 5% that's left.
That's your 5%. Okay, so
Yeah.
we got you at 70% feeler,
Yep.
10% planner, 15% counter, and 5% data driver. Are you sticking with it?
No, absolutely
Okay.
not.
Okay. What's your revision? What do you got?
All right. I think I'm going to drop my feeler down a little bit because that's really what boxed me into a corner here. I'm going to go into 50%.
Okay.
I'm going to up my counter. I just grabbed I got myself 20%. So I'm going to up my counter to 25 and my planner is now going to be 75. Yeah, we'll go 15 on my data
Okay.
collector and keep my planner at 10.
Awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. That's just always a lot of fun. It's a good way to learn kind of a little bit about how we think about our decision making. We're going to
Yeah.
wrap it up. So I got one final question for you. You've really been working at the intersection of biological intelligence and computational systems. So if you could give one piece of advice to leaders who are looking to build AI systems that make genuinely better decisions rather than just faster pattern recognition, what would that be?
Be user-centered. Maintain a laser focus on your key stakeholders, whether that's your employees that are working through processes or your customers or, society as a whole. If you maintain that intense focus on what their needs and what their situation enables, you will end up in a better place. I think that is undoubtedly the single biggest piece of advice that I can give.
I love it. David, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. I really do appreciate the work that you're doing. I think that when we think about behavior and how we act, it's the key to almost anything. In our case, we're humans, but I say that for any animal. Behavior really
Thank
matters.
you.
Would you share with our listeners where they can learn more about you, more about organic intelligence, more about your work at NC State?
Yeah, for sure. The best place to find out about what I'm working on is at my NC State website. So if you just search for me, David Roberts, in NC State or NCSU, you can find me, or you can find my lab's website, which is CIGAR, CIIGAR.CSC, like computer science.ncsu.edu.
Thank you so much. And for our listeners, we just want to thank you for tuning in. Thank you so much. Remember, the best decisions come from great conversations. If you've enjoyed this episode, we want you to subscribe it, rate it, share it with your network, and let's keep the conversation going on social media using Dynamic Decisions Podcast. Also, go check out opndi.org and learn more. And until next time, keep questioning, keep growing, and keep leading with purpose.